My name is Kristen Walters. I am 32 years old. When I stepped into the glittering ballroom of the Silver Crest Resort in Reno, Nevada, my older sister was already at the microphone. My parents were already glaring at me like I had crashed a funeral, and the Nevada Attorney General's office was on its way with an arrest warrant that had her name on it, not mine. Heidi's voice floated over the sound system as she warmed up the crowd about family loyalty and showing up for the people who raised you, every word a carefully aimed dart in my direction. My phone buzzed in my hand one last time with a message from my COO, Ethan Cole. They just left Carson City. Warrant is active. You sure you still want to walk into this? I slipped the phone into my clutch without answering and kept walking toward the sound of her voice and the clink of glassware. If you are hearing this and thinking you would have turned around at the door, tell me in the comments what you would have done and where you are watching from, because part of me still cannot believe I walked straight into the fire on purpose. The carpet under my heels had that busy casino pattern I grew up around in Reno, all swirls and colors meant to keep people awake and spending, but the only thing I really felt was the weight of years between my shoulder blades. I walked past tables of distant cousins and my mom's church friends dressed in their best desert formal wear, every pair of eyes doing the same slow calculation. The younger daughter finally came home, and she had the nerve to look like she was doing well. My blazer fit like armor, and somewhere in the back of the room, Ethan leaned against a wall pretending to study the catering schedule while really watching for the investigators he knew were coming. The lights reflected off the congratulations Florence banner for my grandmother's retirement from teaching pictures of her, with students lining the walls, and I had to swallow hard because she was the only reason I was here. Even knowing about the warrant, knowing Heidi had spent weeks planning to humiliate me on this stage, I was not here for revenge or to cheer when handcuffs appeared. I was here because the woman who spent decades grading papers at our kitchen table had asked me very simply to show up. 5 years earlier, I had walked into a very different room, the formal dining room in my parents' West Reno house, with its heavy wood table-framed photos of Heidi's graduations on the wall, and the constant smell of my mom's roast recipe that she swore restaurants were jealous of. I was 27, still renting a cramped apartment near the Truckee River, working insane hours building a fraud detection platform on a laptop that overheated if I ran too many processes. But in that house, none of it counted. My dad carved his steak like he was cross-examining it and said, "Playing with code is not a business plan, Kristen. Your sister is out there running an actual company that hires people and brings money into this community." Desert Light Events. The event company Heidi had opened in Midtown had become his favorite thing to brag about, as if she were personally responsible for saving Reno from boredom. Heidi smiled, that polished smile she used for clients. "I keep telling her she could come work with me, Dad," she said, tucking a strand of perfectly highlighted hair behind her ear. "We could really use help with admin and logistics. Part-time, of course, until she figures out what she actually wants to do." My fork stalled over the mashed potatoes while my mom set her wineglass down with that tiny, controlled clink that always meant I was about to be compared to Heidi again. "Your sister is trying to help you, sweetheart," my mom said, smiling toward Heidi like she had offered to donate a kidney instead of a part-time assistant job. "You can't live in that apartment forever waiting for some app dream to magically pay your bills. I just wish you'd let us be proud of you the way we are of her." It was not the first time I had heard that sentiment, but something about the way she said it in front of the daughter whose private college tuition they had paid in full, while I worked double shifts and took community college classes at night, made it land differently. They had refinanced a rental condo to give Heidi seed money for Desert Light Events, calling it investing in a sure thing. But when I once asked for a small loan to upgrade my hardware, my dad told me they did not throw good money at experiments. Years of patched-over hurt finally split, and instead of swallowing it, I heard myself say very quietly, "You know what? Watch me." My dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Watch you what he demanded, already gearing up for one of his lectures about gratitude and reality. My mom's smile wavered not because she was worried about me, but because she could feel the edges of her perfect family picture starting to curl. Heidi looked at me like I was a kid having a tantrum in the middle of a church service she was hosting. Watch me build something real without you, I said, pushing my chair back. I did not slam anything, did not shout. I just stood up, walked past the hallway where their framed photos showed Heidi holding trophies and honor roll certificates, grabbed my coat, and stepped out into the cold Nevada night. In the driveway, while their voices rose behind the front door, I blocked my parents' numbers, Heidi's number, and the Walters family group chat that mostly existed to celebrate her milestones. Then I drove back to my one-bedroom near the river, opened my beat-up laptop on a cheap folding table, and went back to the code that had kept me sane for years. That was the night Ecometrics Analytics stopped being a dream and became a line in the sand. Ecometrics was not glamorous in the beginning. It was me, a space heater that rattled, and a website I threw together between debugging sessions offering data analysis and fraud detection to anyone desperate enough to answer my emails. A tiny credit union in Sparks hired me to look into unexplained shortages, and I found a teller skimming small amounts from dozens of accounts, catching it before the missing money became a scandal. A tribal casino outside of Reno brought me in to study betting patterns, and I built them a dashboard that flagged suspicious play before counterfeit chips hit the tables. Every time one of those early clients trusted my computer stuff more than my own family did, it added a brick to the wall of my new life. Word spread quietly the way it often does in small markets, and 3 years after I walked out of that dining room, Ecometrics had an office overlooking the Truckee. A handful of employees and Ethan Cole sitting across from me as my COO. He translated my technical brain into contracts and strategy, and together we signed a multi-year deal with a consortium of regional banks, while my parents posted photos from Heidi's vineyard weddings and charity galas. 3 days before my grandmother's retirement party, I was in our glass-walled conference room reviewing risk models when my phone lit up with a name I had not seen in years, my cousin Talia. We had never been especially close, but she had always seemed more dazzled by Heidi than openly cruel to me, so the text she sent hit different. Heidi is planning something big for Grandma's party, it read. She keeps saying she's going to finally expose the truth about you in front of everyone. Thought you should know. I stared at the screen, half expecting it to disappear, then snorted, because what truth could she possibly drag out of a life she had not been part of since I blocked her? I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Ethan without comment. 10 minutes later, he was in the doorway that creased between his eyebrows that meant we had a problem, not a simple annoyance. I made some calls, he said, dropping into the chair across from me. Your sister hired a firm out of Las Vegas, Red Rock Investigations. Lead guy is a former federal agent named Caleb Morgan. Clean reputation, expensive, very thorough. The idea of Heidi spending real money just to dig through my life would have been funny if my stomach had not tightened the second Ethan said thorough. Ecometrics had grown visible enough that a determined investigator could map out plenty corporate filings contracts, that one fintech profile that called me a quiet force in regional fraud analytics. Something my parents would never read because my face was not wearing a cocktail dress in it. What did he find? I asked, my voice flatter than I intended. Ethan slid a slim manila folder across the table. About you. Nothing except success, he said. Company valuation from the last funding round, the bank consortium deal, the advisory panel with the regional regulator. No dirt, no skeletons. But when Caleb followed the money trail for his own retainer, he tripped over something ugly on the desert light side. Inside the folder were copies of his emails with the Nevada Attorney General's office in Carson City, plus a summary that made my throat burn. For years, Heidi had been creating fake vendor invoices, double booking venues, and quietly moving client deposits into shell accounts. And at the bottom, the worst part, unauthorized withdrawals from a certificate of deposit in my grandmother's name. Caleb's report spelled it out in the kind of unemotional language that makes everything feel even harsher. Over roughly 4 years, Heidi had created bogus invoices for lighting and staging companies that did not exist, transferring payments into accounts she controlled, and she had covered cash flow gaps by shuffling money between events, so one couple's deposit paid for another couple's flowers. The part that made my vision go a little blurry said, unauthorized withdrawals totaling approximately $380,000 from Desert Light operational accounts and approximately $40,000 from a certificate of deposit held by Florence Walters at Silver Sierra Credit Union accessed via a joint authorization created without her knowledge. My grandmother's life savings, the cushion she had built from 40 years of teaching in Washoe County schools, had been turned into Heidi's private line of credit. Ethan rubbed his jaw. Caleb is required to report this level of fraud, he said. The Attorney General's office opened a case. They have bank confirmations on the withdrawals. They're done being patient. I should have felt triumphant, but all I could picture was my parents' faces when it all crashed, and the instant reflex that would follow, somehow. This would still be my fault. The smear campaign started before the ink on Caleb's report was dry, because if there was one thing my family excelled at, it was getting ahead of a narrative by inventing a different one. A distant aunt on my mom's side posted something on Facebook about certain people thinking a little tech money puts them above family, and my mom reacted with a sad face emoji but no words, which said enough. Screenshots from the Walters group chat came in from Talia, messages about how Kristen has been whispering lies to regulators, and some people can't stand to see their sister succeed. My mom emailed me from the account that still sent holiday newsletters. Your father and I expect you to stay away from Grandma's celebration, she wrote. Whatever story you have told yourself about your sister's company, this jealousy and sabotage is beneath you. Family comes first. Please do not make a scene. A few hours later, my dad called from the number I used to know by heart. We heard you've been spreading rumors and stirring up trouble, he said. You are not welcome at the party. I listened then, simply said, believe what you want. I'll see you there, and hung up before the old script could swallow me again. The call that mattered came not from my parents, but from the number labeled Grandma's apartment that I had never been able to bring myself to delete. When I answered, my grandmother's voice came through clear and steady with only the faintest beeping from her retirement complex in the background. Kristen, darling, did your father really tell you not to come to my party? She asked. I exhaled. He did, I said. He thinks I'm behind some investigation into Heidi. Grandma snorted the same dry, unimpressed sound she used to make when a student tried to turn in Wikipedia as a research paper. Your sister thinks the sun rises because she scheduled it, she said. Let me make something clear. I am the one who started asking questions. When I saw money missing from my savings, I hired my own accountant. He found fake invoices at that company of hers and movements out of my account I never approved. When Mr. Morgan showed up asking about you, I handed him everything. The Attorney General's office did the rest. She paused just long enough for the next part to land. I want you there, Kristen. It is my retirement party, not theirs. They do not get to uninvite you from my life. I had already been in therapy for over a year by then, sitting on Dr. Priya Desai's gray couch every other Tuesday, untangling why a grown woman with a thriving company still felt 12 years old every time her parents raised their voices. The week before the party, I laid everything out for her. The investigation, the warrant, the likelihood that Heidi was planning some elaborate public takedown she thought would finally prove I was the problem. Dr. Desai listened, tapping her pen against her legal pad, then asked the question that sliced right through my justifications. If you were not secretly hoping your parents might finally apologize or admit they were wrong, would you still go? She said. I thought about my grandmother at her kitchen table grading papers until midnight, slipping me $20 bills for books, when my parents said they were tapped out after helping Heidi. Yes, I said finally, I would go for her. Dr. Desai nodded. Then that is your reason, she said. And you are not walking into a courtroom to argue for your worth. You are walking into a room to stand beside the one person who consistently saw it. Treat the rest like background noise. On the night of the party, the Silver Crest's fifth-floor ballroom looked like one of Heidi's Instagram posts had come to life. White linens, gold chiavery chairs, and string lights crisscrossing the ceiling above a banner that read, "Congratulations, Florence. 40 years of teaching." Photos of my grandmother with generation after generation of students lined the walls, and somewhere beyond the double doors, the hum of slot machines bled through like background static. As I stepped fully into the room, conversation stuttered and then stalled altogether. My mom's hand flew to her pearl necklace. My dad's jaw tightened. Heidi's eyes flicked over my blazer, the polished boots, the lack of visible desperation, and I watched her recalibrate. At the head table, my grandmother sat in a pale blue suit, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. Nearby, a woman I recognized from business articles, Monica Reyes, a hospitality investor who sat on Desert Light's advisory board, watched the scene with cool interest. Next to Heidi stood her husband and business partner, Tyler Brooks, in a tailored suit and the kind of expensive watch that looks impressive until you know where the money came from. I did not rush to explain anything to any of them. I found a spot near the back wall and simply existed. Heidi tapped the microphone with manicured fingers, the little feedback squeal snapping the room back to attention. Family and friends, she began slipping easily into her event host voice, warm and rehearsed. Thank you for coming to celebrate the most resilient woman I know, my grandmother, Florence. Polite applause rolled through the crowd. Then her tone shifted just enough to make my skin prickle. Tonight is about honoring the people who stayed, she said, eyes skimming over me. The ones who showed up, who took care of family, who kept the Walters name strong in Reno. Some people move away, get a little success, and forget where they came from. A few heads turned toward the back of the room. My dad called out loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Some people think tech money excuses abandoning the folks who sacrificed for them. 5 years earlier, that line would have driven me straight to the stage, trying to shout my resume over their accusations. Tonight, Dr. Desai's words ran like a countertrack in my head. You are not here on trial. Let them talk. So I stayed where I was, arms relaxed, letting the contrast between Heidi's frantic righteousness and my calm do the work I used to beg for. Heidi leaned in for the kill, clearly working up to whatever performance she had planned. And sometimes she said people go so far as to drag regulators into private family business, trying to tear down what others have built instead of building anything themselves. That was the cue the universe apparently had been waiting for, because at that exact moment the ballroom doors opened and 3 people in plain suits walked in, with the kind of quiet authority you cannot fake. The lead investigator, a man I recognized later as Jason Ruiz from the Attorney General's office, held a folder and scanned the room before focusing on the stage. Ms. Heidi Walters, he called his voice, carrying without need of the sound system. The crowd's murmur dropped to a hiss. Heidi tightened her grip on the microphone. We're in the middle of a speech, she said, trying to laugh. Jason did not. Ms. Walters, you are under arrest on suspicion of multiple counts of fraud, theft by misappropriation, and elder financial exploitation, he said. As he read her rights, another investigator stepped forward, turned her gently but firmly, and clicked handcuffs around wrists that had never, as far as I knew, touched anything harder than a barbell or a floral arrangement. For a heartbeat, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then sound crashed back in all at once, glass clinking against plates, someone gasping, my mom choking out. There must be some mistake. Tyler stepped in front of Heidi like a human shield. You can't do this here, he protested. This is a private event. Jason's expression did not shift. Fraud affecting Nevada consumers is absolutely our business, he said. We have documented evidence of falsified vendor invoices. misused client funds, and unauthorized withdrawals from Ms. Florence Walters's account. As they turned Heidi toward the exit, her eyes finally found mine, full of fury and a kind of raw fear I had never seen on her face. The second the doors closed behind the investigators, my dad barreled toward me. "What did you do?" he shouted. "You've always been jealous, but turning your own sister in at your grandmother's party." My mom clutched my arms, sobbing. "How could you, Kristen? After everything we've done for you?" Before I could answer, another voice cut through, steady and amplified, as my grandmother rose, having quietly taken the microphone. "Enough," she said. "Kristen did not cause this. Heidi did when she decided other people's money belonged to her." The room shifted into a different kind of silence, more like a classroom than a party. My grandmother straightened her shoulders, the microphone solid in her hand. "Months ago, I noticed money missing from my savings," she said. "When I asked questions, I was brushed aside, so I hired my own accountant. He found invoices paid to companies that do not exist and deposits from clients that never reached their venues. He found that someone used my account information to move $40,000 without my consent. When a man named Caleb Morgan came asking about Kristen, I gave him everything." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "The state did the rest," she finished. Monica stepped forward, voice cool. "I sit on Desert Light's advisory board," she said. "I was told our discrepancies were accounting errors. I chose to believe that. I was wrong." Jason spoke from near the doorway. "We estimate roughly $380,000 in misappropriated business funds and about $40,000 from Ms. Walters's personal account," he said. "Restitution will be part of any sentence. Civil suits are likely." My dad sagged into a chair as the word restitution landed. My mom turned back to me. "You have money," she said. "You could fix this." I shook my head. "I can't buy away felonies," I said. "And I won't." Once the initial storm of shouting and crying blew itself out, the hotel staff did the only thing they knew how to do at a banquet. They started serving dinner. Plates clinked onto linen servers, moved like ghosts through clusters of stunned relatives, and people who used to love being seen at Walter's family events suddenly calculated how quickly they could leave. Talia slipped to my side, mascara smudged. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "When I texted you about her plan to expose you, I had no idea it was this bad. We all thought you were being dramatic, cutting everyone off. Now it looks like you were the only one who saw what she could do." I shook my head. "I didn't see this coming either," I said. "I just knew staying around them was killing me." A few minutes later, Tyler approached. Ty loosened bravado cracked. "Kristen," he said quietly, glancing toward my parents. "We can frame some of this as mistakes, bad bookkeeping. If you just talk to the investigators, explain that Heidi never meant to hurt anyone, I cut him off. You want me to tell the state that fake vendors and stolen retirement savings were accidents," I said. "I'm not lying for her. You'll all have to live with what she actually did." Before dessert, my grandmother asked for the microphone one more time, and the room obeyed out of pure habit, if nothing else. She did not waste time pretending things were normal. 5 years ago, she began, my younger granddaughter walked out of this family, and many of you shook your heads and said she was ungrateful or dramatic. You kept coming to parties praising Heidi's business, talking about how devoted she was. What you did not see was that Kristen was walking away from a system that asked her to shrink so her sister could shine. She looked straight at me as she spoke. In those 5 years, she built a company that protects people's savings from exactly the kind of schemes we heard about tonight. She did it without your praise, without her parents' help, without this family's approval. Her voice wobbled just a little, but her words did not. "I should have said this sooner," she added. "But I am saying it now, in front of all of you. I am proud of her. Not for rescuing anyone tonight, but for building something honest when others chose shortcuts." Something inside my chest, a place that had stayed clenched since childhood, loosened for the first time at those words. After most of the guests fled and the hotel staff started stacking chairs, I helped my grandmother into her coat and walked her slowly toward the elevator, the glittering banner now hanging crooked behind us. "They're going to come to you next," she said calmly, as if we were discussing the weather. "Your parents. They'll say you owe it to them to fix this." I nodded. "They already started," I said. Mom went straight to my bank account in her head before Heidi was even out of the room. Grandma snorted softly. "Of course she did," she said. "But you do not owe them a rescue. They made their choices. Heidi made hers. The state will handle its part." In the elevator, she squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "I am old enough that people expect me to preach forgiveness," she added. "What I will say instead is this: protect your peace. You finally built one. Do not hand it back to people who only remembered you when they needed a shield." When I drove home that night along the river casino lights flickering on the water, I realized I felt not triumphant, but strangely clean, like someone had finally opened a window in a house that had been shut for years. 18 months later, I stood in what used to be Desert Light Event's sleek midtown office and watched sunlight spill across whiteboards instead of wedding mood boards. After Heidi took a plea deal, she was sentenced to several years in a women's correctional facility outside Las Vegas, with restitution to be paid out of any future income. Desert Light filed for bankruptcy. My parents sold the West Reno house to cover part of the court-ordered amounts, and the landlord was stuck with a long lease and a bad taste in his mouth until I bought the remaining fixtures and lease rights for $1 and a promise. We turned it into the Sierra Ledger Learning Center, a place where Ecometrics staff and local accountants taught small business owners how to read their own books, vet vendors, and spot trouble before it sank them. My program director, Adrian Lee, a former compliance officer, ran workshops for shop owners who confessed they used to sign anything that looked official. On Saturdays, the same conference room, where Heidi once pitched lavish receptions, hosted a mentorship group I started for women whose families tried to sabotage their work. Amaya, a baker whose father called her business a phase, announced her second location there and did not invite him to the opening. Ecometrics kept growing alongside it, picking up more regional banks and credit unions and, somewhere in the middle of a fintech conference in San Francisco, I met Daniel Foster, a renewable energy founder who asked thoughtful questions about my work and later about me without once implying I owed my success to anyone else. My life filled up with people who showed up because they respected me, not because they shared my last name. On my grandmother's 79th birthday, we held a small dinner for her at the Sierra Ledger Center. Just her, me, Talia, a couple of retired teacher friends, Adrian with his legendary cookies, and no empty place settings reserved for my parents. They tried to send messages through old neighbors about how family is all you have at the end of the day, but I let those words drop. Heidi wrote from prison about how unfair the system was. I did not answer. The people who hurt me most paid obvious prices. Time in a cell, bankruptcy, lost status, but the deeper consequence was this: their access to me ended. I did not forgive them. I did not soften. I built a life that does not require their approval, and I intend to keep it that way. If any part of my story sounds like yours, hear me clearly. You are allowed to walk away and let people choke on consequences they cook themselves. Tell me in the comments what you would have done, because I am done giving them another chance.